Good morning, everybody. It's Saturday the 23rd of July 2022. The Law Commission published its report into legal marriage and changes in legal marriage on Tuesday the 19th, and I've just finished 471 pages of it. It's a really interesting document. It's taken a complete rethink of marriage law in England and Wales, and we need to be very clear, it only addresses marriage law in England and Wales. It doesn't look at Scotland or Northern Ireland at this stage. It's also very important to note that this is not yet law, and we have seen in the last few days after the report came out and various summaries of it were published, there have been some celebrants going out there saying, I can now do legal marriages. No, you cannot. That must be very explicitly stated. This document has now to be considered by the government, and they have 6 months to make an initial response to that. That doesn't mean they have 6 months to turn it into law. It means they have 6 months to say kind of whether they're going to or not. Once the government decides that it might turn it into law or not, it doesn't have to take the whole thing. It doesn't have to take these 471 pages and turn them into an Act of Parliament and put it through Parliament as it is. They may change it. They may leave sections out of it. And interestingly, for those of us who are independent professional civil celebrants, the bit that they might leave out of it is the bit for celebrants. It's quite clear that that section could be detached as a section completely. So, whilst this has been a terrific piece of work and a terrific victory for those of us who've been lobbying for this over a number of years now, it isn't a done deal. It isn't signed, sealed and delivered. Her Majesty has not signed an Act of Parliament, and it has not yet come into being. Having said all of that, and sounding a little bit negative, let's have a look at some of the really positive stuff that's in this document. And of the 471 pages, an awful lot of it doesn't need for us to go through in huge amounts of detail. There are great sections looking at religious ceremonies, specifically Jewish, Quaker and Anglican ceremonies, which have specific legal status within the current legislation. So we can put those to one side. What the Law Commission is trying to do is unravel this double standard where some faith groups are treated in one way and other faith groups are treated in another way, and non-faith couples don't have an option. So they're trying to rationalise it so that there is a single set of requirements for everybody. But they've still ended up with a distinction between faith and belief groups, so groups of people who belong to a faith or belong to a philosophical organisation, and essentially what that means is faith groups and people like Humanists who are members of Humanists UK, and then people who are independent of a belief system. And that would be where most of us as professional celebrants sit. We may have beliefs of our own, we may have faith, or we may be atheists, we may be humanist in our outlook in life, but our celebrancy is not rooted in our faith. And so this document makes a clear distinction between those who are operating within a construct of a belief system and those who are independent. The proposals also speak of officiant, and the reason for that language is the officiant, the celebrant, the person taking the marriage, has a legal role. They hold an office in this context. And one of the key things is that they have some legal requirements that they have to make. Sorry, you can hear some cars behind me, rather some motorbikes. I'm up here at ICPC's training centre at Hightrend House in North Yorkshire, enjoying the beautiful top pond and the peace and quiet, except it isn't right now. So, to come back to one of the key parts of this is that the celebrant, the person taking the marriage, has a legal role, and there are various legal requirements that they are going to be asked to do. So the couple will go to their local register office and file their paperwork, and once they've got their paperwork to say that they can legally marry, they must also say who it is that they intend to marry them. There are provisions to allow that to change at the last minute if the officiant is ill or some other requirement. And then the officiant must ensure that the paperwork is all in place. They must ensure after the marriage that the paperwork is filed and registered with the register office. So the officiant has some very serious legal requirements, but there are other legal requirements as well. And this is one of those things where ongoing training is going to be necessary. We can't all just suddenly sign up as soon as this becomes law and start taking legal marriages, because we have a legal obligation under this proposal, would have a legal obligation, to ensure that the couple have the mental capacity to enter into a marriage, that neither of the parties are being coerced into a legal marriage, and that they are both of them are entering into it under their own free will. And so these are things which we are going to need to look into as to what's the training that's required, and that some celebrants may choose not to try and become registered to take legal marriage on the basis that they don't want to take on the legal liability for a claim that might come later on, where one party comes back and says, I was coerced into this marriage and you didn't check. So this isn't a free pass for us as celebrants. It carries some really serious legal requirements that we need to undertake in order to do this work. Now, let's move on to kind of the differences between the current legislation, which very much regulates the place. So here at Hightrend House, we have a legal marriage license, so we can perform legal marriages. There are 5 areas within the building, or buildings here, where under current legislation legal marriages can take place. Now, during the COVID regulations, something that was changed was that anywhere that had an indoor legal marriage license would be able to take marriages or host marriages anywhere within the grounds. So at the moment, as the legislation stands, we're able to do a legal marriage here at Hightrend House with a registrar anywhere within our 3¼ acre grounds, because that change to the regulations to allow outdoor marriages still stands. What this proposed change does is to take away the registration of the place. In essence, a couple can get married almost anywhere. It isn't the place that is now going, or the proposal, it isn't the place that's going to be registered, it is the officiant that's going to be registered in the person taking the marriage. Now, this doesn't mean you can get married anywhere. The officiant, and I'll quote here, the officiant will have a responsibility to uphold the dignity and significance of marriage in agreeing to a particular form of ceremony and the place. And the officiant risks deauthorization. Well, fabulous word that is. So it is something that we as officiants need to think about when a couple say, I want to get married on a beach. In principle, that's fine. There is, of course, the question of does the landholder consent to that happening? We could try and find people trying to do legal marriages, for example, on National Trust land. The National Trust must give their consent that it's going to happen. The landowner needs to be asked. Obviously, if it's Crown lands, then there are a whole raft of questions that come up there about whether couples can get married on land or in buildings owned by the Crown. And there will be a consent process that will have to be worked out. And the devil really will be in the detail there. And that's going to be a really interesting thing to see how they get to the bottom of that. There is a question mark in current regulations. A pub or a bar cannot get a location license to conduct legal marriages. Pubs and bars are explicitly ruled out as places that are not fit and proper for the conducting of legal marriages. There is a question as to whether, under the new rules, they would be allowed to conduct legal marriages, in that it's the person conducting it that is the person that would be registered rather than the place. So that's an interesting question about how those things come together and how it is going to be whether couples really do have complete choice or just pretty wide choice. But it will mean, and explicitly, that they would be able to, for example, have their legal marriage here by this beautiful pond, or in the woods in front of me or beside me, or in any of our buildings. So that's a great change. How will celebrants be registered? Well, this is a really interesting one. Within the discussion of it, there has been, you'll be aware at the moment that for a legal marriage, two registrars are required. So 2 people are required to be present at the legal marriage in order for it to be valid. And the Law Commission are proposing to take away that requirement, that only one officiant will be necessary, which I think makes sense. One of the interesting things they said, during our consultation process, several people said that there should be 2 people present, but were unable to explain why. And I think that's quite fascinating, that people were saying, well, this is how it's done now, this is how it should be done in the future, but didn't explain why it was that way in the first place. For example, an Anglican priest can conduct a ceremony on their own with no requirement for a second person there. So why should an officiant or a registrar? Yeah, so I come back to I just noticed one of my other notes. Sorry, this is going to be a bit ad hoc because I haven't scripted the whole thing. It's recommended that all weddings should be attended in person by an officiant who should have the legal duty. So the officiant must be there. You can't do it over the internet. The legal duty to ensure the parties freely express consent to marry each other, ensure all the other requirements of the ceremony are met, and ensure that the schedule or marriage document is signed by each of the couple, 2 people who have witnessed the parties' expression of consent and themselves. So the marriage schedule that the couple have picked up from the registration office, the register office, needs to be signed by 5 people, each of them, 2 witnesses, and the officiant. And it is for the General Register Office to issue guidance to all officiants on how to fulfil their legal duties and responsibilities. And there will be a whole bunch of training that comes out of that. Recommend that all officiants should have a responsibility to uphold the dignity and significance of marriage in their role as officiants and in officiating at weddings. So, yeah, the question, could you officiate a marriage wearing scuba gear at the bottom of a swimming pool? Possibly, but somebody might argue that the dignity and significance of marriage were being damaged there. That's an interesting one, and there'll be legal cases, there'll be court cases arguing the toss about this kind of thing in the future. One of the really interesting things that's buried away in all of this is they recommend that there should be no time limit on the authorisation of officiants. So once an officiant has become authorised, the proposal is that that authorisation then remains for as long as they wish to be an officiant, which differs from some of the other situations around the world where officiants are authorised for a period of 12 months or 2 years or something like that, and have to reapply or renew their validation. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that there won't be requirements, that the General Register Office won't come out with recommendations and requirements that there must be ongoing continuing professional development and training. In fact, I think that would be a good idea. They have recommended that registration officers, so members of the registration service, are still able to take legal marriages. So it isn't that they're taking legal marriages away from the registration service and giving it to independent officiants. It will be both. So from a business perspective, there is the competition there of registrars and independent celebrants, and we'll see how that plays out. But we can expect that the registration services will. The extra flexibility comes to them as well, and so there will be a great deal of competition. And just thinking out loud, I think we should expect to see a price differential as well. We'll see registration services who, remember, are paying relatively low wages to registrars seeking to undercut, in some senses, other celebrants. I think for us as independent and professional celebrants, that opens up a range. It opens up a functioning market where a couple can say they want essentially an elopement, and a celebrant may offer elopements as part of their offering. Great, away you go, you can do something very low cost. Or they may want something, a 12-hour ceremony that the whole thing is scripted and planned and choreographed. That would definitely be at the other end of the cost bracket. So it does give us huge flexibility, because in a sense the only thing that is required for the marriage to be legal under these proposals is for the document to be signed by the couple, 2 witnesses and the officiant. There's very little else that has to be around it. So I think in summary, because I've been waffling on for quite a while already, this is a really interesting document. It has been very carefully thought through. It isn't a carte blanche. For example, celebrants have to be of good character, so there will be criminal records checks. The General Register Office will get to determine who a fit and proper person is. And so at least a minimum, they will have to be over the 18 and not have any unspent convictions, and for certain offences, and which offences those aren't being defined at this stage. They must have undertaken training in the legal aspects of being an officiant, which is provided by a nominating organisation, and it is the organisation that's approved by the Registrar General. or that training provided by the registrar, the General Register Office. And they must understand their legal responsibilities. The General Register Office will keep a public list of all nominated officiants, the name, the town or district in which they reside, the organisation that they belong to. It is possible under this proposal that they should be able to opt out from having their nominating organisation or their place of residence listed on a public list where that might create a specific risk to them. So there are opt-out clauses that would allow for extra privacy in certain cases. I don't want to delve into where that might be relevant, but it is possible that you could not be listed on the public register. Sorry, scanning my notes, I made so many notes when reading this thing. And it is the nominating organisation that is responsible for ensuring that the celebrant is continues to be fit and proper and offer the correct level of service. Hello, Ren. And that's going to have a cost implication because it means that the nominating organisations, such as ICPC, are going to have to decide how invasive that process is. Are we going to have to keep a central record of every ceremony that each of you performs? Are we going to have to keep some kind of, perhaps a video of the ceremony, so that if somebody should come back and make a complaint, we can go back and look at it? All of these questions we're going to have to dig into and work out what that entails, what's necessary, what's proportional. So there's a huge amount of work for us to do. But it is a really, really positive step. So for the moment, what should each of us be doing? And if you've watched this far, well done. Right now, there's very little that any of us can do. The Westminster Parliament is about to go into recess, and at that point, nothing happens over the summer. We've then got a new Prime Minister coming in September, and essentially they're going to be focused on an awful lot of rather urgent stuff. I suspect reforming marriage law is not going to be top of their list of things to get on with. So, as I said at the beginning, the government have got 6 months to respond. Where are we now? We're July, August, September, October, November, December, January next year. There will be some kind of response. And that response might be, we'll look at this in 2 years' time, or we'll look at this in the next Parliament. It could be that the Queen's speech opening Parliament in the autumn this year contains a bill or a proposal to bring forward a bill in this Parliament. We don't know. We have no idea. Only the governing party, which will be, for the moment, the Conservative Party, led by their Prime Minister, who we don't know who that will be at the moment, will have the decision about when and how quickly to bring forward this legislation, or whether to. And we must remember they don't have to. They are not required to turn this into law. I think we need to be very positive. We've already seen some lovely interviews going on in the media, but actually, given everything else that's going on in the world right now, cost of living crisis and all this other stuff, we may feel this is really important, and it is really important, but the media are not going to be on our side in terms of wanting great long discussions about it. Probably one of the most effective things you can do is go and visit your MP. Don't write to them. All MPs have surgeries in their constituencies. You can just rock up to some of them. Others you need to have an appointment. Go visit them. Go and say, this report. Print out the cover page and maybe 2 or 3 other pages. The really interesting pages for celebrants are between 111 and 162. And go say, look, this is really important to me. This is my profession. This is my vocation in life. And I'd really appreciate it if the government and Parliament could address this sooner rather than later and not just keep kicking it down the road, as has been said of so many things recently. By physically being there with your MP, they can ask you questions about it. You can convey to them how important it is. You can give them examples of couples in your area who have found it difficult to have a marriage that was meaningful to them. I know of one couple who are getting married in August who want a celebrant-led, are having a celebrant-led ceremony, but their local registration office refused to give them the 2+2, the legal minimum ceremony, because they were all booked. So essentially what was happening was the local registration service was saying, no, we're going to make you pay more money because we don't want you to book the legal minimum because we don't make any money on it. That's just wrong. It's just wrong. Anyway, calm down, Stuart. So I think the most effective thing we can do is lobby our MPs in person. It may be that we write, at this stage we're writing to encourage them to bring forward a bill, to do this, to implement this huge document pretty much as it stands. I've not seen anything in there that I particularly disliked. And let's see what happens. We're not going to be providing a form letter, and let me explain very clearly why we're not going to be providing a form letter. MPs get inundated with form letters from lobbying groups, special interest groups, and form letters get put to the bottom of the pile. As soon as an MP's got 2 or 3 letters, and the MP won't even see it, their staff will have done this, as soon as 2 or 3 largely identical letters have been looked at, it gets put to one side. It's clearly a campaign group. It's when they get individual letters from constituents, when they get letters that are written from your heart, what you're thinking about it, that's the ones they begin to take notice of. And so what I really want to encourage you is write to your MP, go visit your MP, and talk about why this is important to you. ICPC will continue to work with the other leading organisations who are part of the Wedding Celebrancy Commission to push this agenda, to encourage the government to work with us. We are also putting together what a syllabus will look like so that we can propose to the General Register Office, Registration Service, here is a training course that contains everything that you want celebrants, officiants to have, and so that we can offer you an upgrade to your existing level 3 certificate or level 3 diplomas, whichever it is that you have. And here is a bolt-on unit that will give you the knowledge you need to do the legals. And so it will almost certainly, I can't say for sure, be that you'll need at least the level 3 certificate or the level 3 diploma in couples ceremonies in order to then add the bolt-on for how to do the legals and do that. Which, I love this place, just all the birds, and you probably can't hear it, but we've got beehives up here as well now, and the place is just covered in bees. It's just absolutely glorious. Anyway, I digress. For those of you who have trained but not completed the NOCN Level 3 certificate that we've been offering for the last 4 years, if you're still within 12 months of training, that's fine, that's all included. If you're out of time, if you're over the 12 months, then we have got a catch-up program and we'll be publishing details on how you can get that done so that we can be as ready as we can be and I've made no secret about it. I'm fully intending that on the day that we can start running the catch up, the additional training, sorry, to do the legals, I would love to be running that course at 1 minute past midnight, so that we can get people trained as quickly as possible, and authorised. Anyway, I'm going to shut up. I have no idea how long I've been rabbiting on. Hope you are well. I'm certainly enjoying the slightly cooler weather. It was just too hot last week. And hope to see all of you soon as possible. We've got our retreat happening in November. We know that some cohorts are organising their own little get-togethers up here. If you're interested in that, there are details on the website and in some emails that have gone out where, as a cohort, you can rent the Bennett's building up here at High Trent House, self-catering for a weekend, and have a lovely time, just your cohort together. We've got the study group still running each month, and I know that lots of you get together informally, both online and physically in person. Keep that going. Celebrants need to support one another, especially now that we have something that we're all pushing towards. Catch up with you all soon.